business communication is the most important skill that you could pick up. And if I was encouraging BU students who are watching this, I would say learn how to write clear and concise communication.
Hello and welcome to Proud to BU, the alumni podcast from Boston University. I'm your host, Jeff Murphy. I love doing this show. And if you like what we're doing with the Proud to BU podcast, I hope you'll take a minute and subscribe to our newsletter for giveaways and bonus content. Sign up on our website now at bu.edu/proudtobu. My guest today is Jeremy Lowe, a CGS and Questrom grad who's now the Vice President of Talent and Partnerships at the legendary Dick Clark Productions in Los Angeles. I talked with Jeremy about his work on big TV events like the Golden Globes and New Year's Rockin' Eve, and he told me about how he's still using skills he learned at BU, both inside and outside the classroom, as a successful entertainment executive.
Proud to BU showcases the journeys of some of Boston University's most interesting and accomplished alumni. Inspiring grads share the highs, the lows, and the challenges they've overcome along the way from CommAv to innovative careers. No matter where your path takes you, proud to be you.
Jeremy, it is awesome to see you again. Thank you so much for spending time with us on the Proud to BU podcast.
Of course, it's so exciting to be here after all these years. It's been 10 years since I graduated BU, so this feels like the perfect time to do something like this.
You had recently told me that you just got back from the Sundance Film Festival. You were there, but it has nothing to do with your current job, right? Have you just always been a lover of movies and TV and music and just a real media consumer?
Yeah, so while it's not my primary focus to go to film festivals or that I work in film production, I'm in entertainment, and I think it's so important for people to have a strong understanding of all disciplines of entertainment, which is why I really try and expose myself to as many concerts as I can in LA, why I like to go to Sundance Film Festival. These are all creative events and surrounded by creatives, whether they're filmmakers, composers, creators who make content for digital media. I love just immersing myself in as much as possible. And yeah, I went to Sundance with some friends. Inevitably, you dip your toes into some work things. You meet people that you've collaborated with. But I think that it's so important to stimulate yourself intellectually and entertainment-wise. There's no better place than Sundance, where you get to see stories and documentaries and creative pieces from some of the most brilliant minds in entertainment. So I try not to miss it when possible.
If I'm remembering right, you're born and raised in LA, right? Do you think that has anything to do with the role that entertainment has played in your life? Was your family big, always going to the movies and things like that, or?
So my parents are not in the entertainment industry. I think definitely growing up in LA, you get influenced by it, right? I remember as a kid going to TV tapings and thinking it was the coolest thing. I got to go to Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and all these and American Idol, I remember in middle school. And just that adrenaline of the lights going down and something spectacular is about to happen, and it's recorded and there's celebrity and what's going to be there is going to get seen by the masses. There's no better feeling than that. And I think what attracts me to my work in entertainment is that what we create, whether it's a performance or a great segment or a piece of social content, has the opportunity to be seen by millions of people, which is not something that you get in every industry.
Okay, so you're at Dick Clark Productions. We'll talk about your various roles inside that organization, but I'm just curious to know, as a young alum, was Dick Clark a thing in your life, a presence, a person that you knew about and all the work that he was doing?
So it's such a great question. Before I actually worked at Dick Clark, I used to not be the biggest fan of anything New Year's Eve related. I used to go to bed before midnight. I remember I was I wish I was a part of something on that night that felt really cool and big. But my relationship with the brand Dick Clark Productions started a long time ago. I was a huge fan of the show, So You Think You Can Dance, and I still am a fan. DCP actually still produces that show to this day. And I remember in the early seasons of the show watching and going to tapings and being like, who produces this show? I want to work with them. It's really cool. It's music, dance, it's live. And at the end of every episode, they'd roll the title cards or the end cards, and you would see, oh, Dick Clark Productions. So that was how I found out about the company. And I researched and saw, whoa, like this company actually doesn't just do this show. They do so many events that are live throughout the year. The American Music Awards, which I've loved watching, the Billboard Music Awards, the Golden Globes, and so many more tentpole events that sort of when I was at the end of 11th grade, I reached out with, I'd done some summer jobs in LA, but I felt that rush of ambition. And I reached out about at that point, an unpaid internship. And, it taught me so much about following up and creating a strategy and how do you get in at a place. I remember I sent a resume and I called and I would do it sort of once a week and nothing happened. And one day I got in touch with somebody on the phone and they said, oh, actually, like this person is in charge of interns. Send them your resume. I got in touch and it was a crazy week. I'll never forget. I was in 11th grade. It was just wild. I got in touch with the person who ran the internship program and went in for an interview that week and got offered an internship on the spot. And from there, again, I was aware of the Dick Clark name and brand, and Dick Clark was still alive at that point, but I never met him. I remember, watching him with Ryan Seacrest on TV, and even before that, when he was on New Year's Solo. But he's always the company has been a part of my life almost for half my life at this point, having started working with them when I was, at such a young age.
So you're 11th grade, you're already taking on unpaid internships.
I know.
At that point, are you already thinking like my career is entertainment?
Yeah, I think at that point I wanted to be in entertainment.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because why did you come to Boston? How did you end up at BU?
So it's such an interesting combination of time. And when I look back, I applied to a bunch of schools. BU happened to really be the best fit on paper I knew I wanted to go to a big city. I knew I wanted to be somewhere with like good business and communication programs because I was between the two at that point. I wanted to be in a city where there was strong Jewish life as well, because that's a big part of my identity. And I went to tour a bunch of the schools that I got into. And I also happened to, I'll never, can't underestimate the weather factor. Happened to visit BU on a beautiful April spring day where there was just, it was picturesque. It felt right. And I remember at the end of the day, like I was going to see another school the following day, but I kind of knew in that moment, okay, this is going to be where I go. And then at that point, I almost put the decision off I made the decision and didn't really think about it for like 4 months because I knew I had this summer in LA with another summer at Dick Clark. And I just wanted to focus on my entertainment, experience as much as possible. But it ended up on paper actually being a great decision and then in real life, a great decision as well. Because so many people go away for college. That's the opportunity to step out of the city that maybe you've grown up in or plan to live in and try something different. And what I didn't know is that so many people who I met at college would eventually still be my best friends after, or peers that I would meet. Or you were talking about Sundance. I was in a coffee shop and ran into two other BU 2014 alum, it's a small world in that way. And I don't think that people, there's many reasons why you may want to stay in a certain city for college. But for me, leaving LA was the best choice I could have made because I made friends from all over the world. I got to live on my own and I still got to work, and we'll talk about it, on, entertainment adjacent things through my extracurriculars at BU.
So it sounds to me like you were really making some wise decisions as a high school kid. And I'm really curious to the decision that you made I'm guessing that most people would think naturally you were a comm student, but you came to Boston University and went to the Questrom School of Business. How did you make that decision? And were there people in your life that really gave you good advice about going the business route as opposed to the hardcore communications route?
So and I have nothing, like, I'm sure I would have loved the communications program, but I have had a marketing mind since I was, 10 or 11 years old. I've loved the idea of advertising and how do you take a message and get it out to the masses. And I've been very entrepreneurial and I love coming up with business ideas. And while I took one intro to communications class and I enjoyed it, I thought that there'd be a bit more sort of like in terms of being able to go into, because who knew, maybe I was going to do entertainment. Maybe I wanted to go work at a big consumer products brand and do marketing. I didn't, I wanted to leave my options as open as possible. And I thought I can still really work in entertainment and, stimulate myself creatively and meet the best kind of creative people, writers, directors, producers. I can do all of that, but I want to have a strong business sense. I want to understand and be able to look at a budget and understand 100%, okay, like these are, this is how we're doing financially, or this is, if this event doesn't happen, how does it impact the business? And for me, I think I would have been great either way. In fact, I almost sometimes think maybe I should have just studied something that had nothing to do with any of what I was doing. I love people. Maybe I should have been a sociology major, but I ended up doing business just because I think it gave me a bit more of like wider knowledge of how the corporate world works.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
And I think it also sets me apart a little bit from a lot of my peers, which again, not that there's one right way or the other, but I'm able to, when I'm in a meeting and there's, terms that I heard in a marketing class thrown around, or, in a finance meeting and people are talking about, how the sort of projections for a quarter or a year look, I think that those are things that take me back to those classrooms at BU. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that finance class or that marketing class. And I feel that BU really set me up for that. The other thing that I'll say BU really set me up well for, it was the best class. And it's sort of, I think a lot of people didn't realize how important it is, but when you are in the School of Management, School of Business, I guess now, there's a business communications class that everyone has to take where you learn how to write for business. And I have found, and I work with a lot of people who have come out of college, even people who have been in the field for a while, that business communication is the most important skill that you could pick up. And if I was encouraging BU students who are watching this, I would say, learn how to write clear and concise communication, because in any industry, that's super valuable. People are short on time. They want to know what the message is really quickly and succinctly. And there are so many things I remember from that class that kind of set me up to be a master communicator.
That's great. Speaking about your BU student experience, one of the things that we're doing this season on the podcast is actually allowing members of our audience to ask questions during these interviews. So to that end, we've got a recent comm grad from the class of 2023 named Josh, who has a question for you.
Awesome.
I'm Josh, a film and TV graduate from the College of Communication, and I'm asking, what was a club, class, or activity at BU that was important to you?
Great question, Josh. So when I came to BU, my first semester was a master class in networking. And it really actually prepared me for working in entertainment professionally, because meeting people, talking to them, being comfortable with yourself is the most important thing. And I ended up going to many extracurricular meetings and extracurricular activities and meeting the e-boards and the students and all the different people that were part of it. But I knew that I wanted to somehow still carry some entertainment experience. And I knew that BU had a programming council where where students were able to book events and put on, not just things for a smaller group, but for the campus as a whole. And that's something that's followed me all the way through from BU, where you get this kind of mass visibility with these events, through to these live television events that so many people around the world get to see. So I, through sort of going to many different extracurricular activity meetings, landed and went to a student activities fair and met, it's such a small, crazy world right now, but I met Jeff's wife, who used to work at BU, Gina. Big shout out to Gina. And there was this, I'll never forget this moment. There were all the student activities ambassadors were wearing these I Heart BU shirts. And I think at that point I really did like BU. So I was ready to rep. And I happened to run into Gina and I asked, hey, where can I get one of those t-shirts? And this is a long way of getting to me joining Programming Council, by the way. But I asked Gina, where could I get one of those t-shirts? And she was like, they're not for students, like they're just for our staff, but I'll make you a deal. Like, I'm overseeing this program this activity called Programming Council. Come, if you want to come to our meeting tonight and meet the team, like I'll get you a shirt. And I was like, you know what? Like, okay, let's do it. Like I knew I wanted to do that. And I had kind of expressed to her that I was interested in joining Programming Council. And it ended up being the exact place that I needed to be at BU. And to respond back to Josh's question, Programming Council's job was to book probably 12 events throughout the year that were aimed at campus-wide programming. So not for specific sort of niche interests, but as wide ranging as possible. And what I really appreciated, while, many freshmen and younger people may want to go out and party, or they may want to go, have different like things that they do off campus, Programming Council was really about building community at BU. It was, how do we provide an amazing opportunity for people to do things on a Friday night that's on campus, that's safe, that's well planned and funded. And I met some amazing people in the first year who became my best friends. And I almost, while I always prioritized my studies, saw Programming Council as an opportunity to sharpen my skills in entertainment, in leadership, in marketing. And I got to work on marketing campus-wide events and meet so many people. I remember the first year I marketed, do they still do Back Bay Ball? I feel like that's a BU like staple, but it was back in the day, and we would get over like 1,000 people to go to this sort of campus-wide event. And I just remember meeting so many people and sitting outside dining halls, selling tickets, and working with different teams on how to get, these events placed in BU Today or other, places that would get visibility. And it just expanded my network. If you're catching a drift here, I love meeting new people. So Programming Council was a massive win. I grew into more leadership roles over time. I think probably planned every flagship Programming Council event, from Mr. and Miss BU to, more Back Bay Balls, to spring concerts, to comedy shows. And it was a great way to develop leadership skills, but also still be able to, while I'm studying business and taking more, liberal arts classes, be able to like stay sharp on everything that's happening in entertainment and how I could bring that to campus.
Introducing a new BU podcast.
Explain This.
Our new podcast from The Brink explores big and small pictures of research done at Boston University, from microbiology to art history and everything in between. Join us as we interview on-campus experts who break down areas of study and put their work into real-world contexts.
To learn more about us, go to bu.edu/brink.
So you I know you told me that you had sort of remained in touch with Dick Clark Productions, while
Yeah.
you were still at BU. I know you also had a bunch of internships with other media companies during your time here, but right after graduating, you've got your degree in your hand. Do you decide to go work full time at Dick Clark, or what happens? How do you make that decision about what you're going to do first job out of school?
So that was the one thing. And I think in the business school, everyone from like October is thinking about like, where am I going to work? What job am I going to get? And it's a thing, at your senior year, it's natural. You're thinking about the future. How am I, excuse me, like what's my job going to be? How am I going to make money? Where am I going to live? All that kind of stuff. And I had stayed in touch with the team at Dick Clark Productions. I had started on the social media digital marketing team, which when I interned there was 2 people. And, in my time there grew to be 20 people. It was a massively growing field. And I would come back when I would go home for Thanksgiving. I would work the American Music Awards, which were always the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And over winter break, I would work the Golden Globes, which were right in the middle of winter break. And that was a great opportunity to keep my keep my experience fresh, stay on the radar of all the people at the company, and also have fun. I mean, I remember I would go back to school and people would be like, "Oh my God, that looked so awesome. Like you learned so much. You got to work on this really cool event." And I would see the team grow. I remember in 2009, I live tweeted the American Music Awards from a seat in the auditorium. And by like 2013, 2012, there was a whole staff of people who were, taking photos and writing copy and planning the whole thing out. So to see it grow was very cool. But yeah, I did a bunch of other internships, which internships I highly recommend. They teach, not only do you get to meet people who will disperse all over the industry and do really interesting things, but you get to find out what is and what isn't for you. And I loved all my internships. But you start to develop like, oh, I'm really interested by this. And maybe looking at data isn't as interesting to me, but it's still an important part of what I do. So I interned at CIA to get some agency experience. I interned at Sony Music, a company that I still work with in my job today. And I interned at the LA Philharmonic with the Hollywood Bowl one summer, which was the coolest experience ever. Warner Brothers. So just really trying to round out my experience. And it's funny, I still run into people from those internships all the time. At Sundance, I ran into someone from Warner Brothers who I worked with. So I would just, to kind of close the point out, I know a lot of people also spend time like, oh, like I'm looking for a job or I need to find this right after college. It's so rare in the field of like media and entertainment that you'll have a job 3, 6 months before you graduate. We're in an industry that's rapidly changing. You can read about it. Studios are consolidating. The trends are changing of how people are consuming content. So at least what I've observed, positions open when people need to be hired sort of on a 2, 4 week basis. Sometimes we hire freelancers within a week. We're like, okay, we need this. Are you available? Great. We interview you. We make the offer. So I would just kind of share that if you are in a position and you're watching this and you're like, oh, I'm graduating or I haven't been able to find something, it doesn't just, it's not a long lead industry. Projects get greenlit and go right into production and then jobs open up.
So one thing I really wanted to ask you about was having stayed at Dick Clark for as long as you have, and I know that you've had several different roles inside the company, but what is it that keeps you there? Have you ever thought about leaving for one of these other organizations or maybe trying out New York
Right.
City for a while?
I mean, what's kept me there, first off, I love so we own the IP of the award shows that we produce, right? So it's not like we get hired by somebody to produce their show for them. So I love that the company has these shows for life. We're not going like New Year's Rockin' Eve is ours and we'll produce it forever. That's a really important thing to see in a company. The second is really the people that work there. When I started, and still to this day, but especially when you're like between 22 and 25, starting out, and even though I grew up in LA, I didn't really know a ton of people. A lot of my friends had left and not come back after college. Those first few years were so formative because I became best friends with the people I worked with, and we would go out to dinner after, and we would hang out on weekends, and we just knew everything about each other. And I want to give like the biggest shout out to who was the guy who was the head of our department, and found me and gave me my first internships in social media and kind of brought me into the department, Ariel Elazar, who is my mentor and one of my best friends to this day. He encouraged all of us to spend time together, and we were the social and digital department. We worked in a different area where we all sat really close to each other, and we could be aware of what everyone was working on, and we were encouraged to collaborate and spend time together. And that, I have friends who work at a lot of companies in entertainment. You don't see that anywhere else. It's so unique, and my best friends to this day are still the people that I met in those first few years, who come back to freelance with us, which is always fun and exciting.
Yeah.
But even throughout the years, you just keep picking up and meeting new people at the company who end up kind of becoming your best friends. So
You've already shared some great advice. I know that being in LA, you've gone to the BU in LA program, the study abroad program that the university has, to meet with students, give them some advice. You told me that you've been hiring BU folks as freelancers.
yeah.
I'm wondering, with the entertainment industry, you made this wise decision to sort of learn the business side of it. But with any career, there's this balance of like hard skills and soft skills. So like you've got like the business fundamentals, maybe a little bit of technical stuff for production standpoint, but looking back on your career, what is that? What are those skills that you need to be successful in the entertainment industry? Is it more about communication and leadership and teamwork? Is it more about like just really knowing the nuts and bolts of what you're trying to do?
Right. So communication, I think I mentioned it earlier and you brought it up again just now. To me, that is the most important skill in any industry. And it's the reason why you always hear people being like, "Oh, that must have been a miscommunication." And it's a skill that no one will ever be perfect at. It's something like an athlete works on, right? You could always, shoot more free throws or swim more laps. It's just communication is only something that gets better through practice. And I do think that that's something that, especially for young graduates right now, I would really recommend you refine how you write and communicate. Especially, we live in a world where texting is so prevalent. No one gets on the phone anymore to do things. So the way you write is so important. I would say in entertainment, the hours and the drive that you have are really important. So I always say the workday doesn't end when you leave the office. In fact, sometimes the workday starts before you arrive at the office, when you have a meeting before work. And, even last night, I had a dinner and a concert that I went to, and I was with people who are in the industry, watching a show, discovering a new artist, meeting with, people that we might end up collaborating with, and recognizing that not all your work happens in the office and it may require late nights. And, investing in yourself, right? Going to Sundance and going to things that will create opportunities for you. You can't expect that things are just going to come your way. I think movies have often romanticized the idea that things just fall into people's laps. Or you just manifest something and it comes true. It's like, no, you have to actually go out and meet the people and talk to them and pound the pavement. And then things start to happen. And sometimes you might go meet a person and you might think, "Oh, this is going to be a great collaboration," but they introduce you to somebody else, and that ends up becoming what is really powerful out of that meeting. So net, I would say being persistent and going to like meet people, understand how you can bring value to them, strong communication, and I would say to develop sort of a personal brand or niche for yourself, something that you can do better than other people, or not even that you can do better, that you have a expertise in that not everybody else has as, as much of an expertise in. Subject matter experts in any field always do well, and being able to see, okay, this is how this industry is changing, or this is something I should learn more about because there's going to be opportunities there. If you can figure those things out, you'll go really, really far.
There's like 55 other questions I want to ask you about your job, Jeremy, but we're kind of running against time. So last year you got what appears to me as a really big promotion. You're now the vice president of talent and partnerships for Dick Clark Productions.
Yeah.
How would you explain exactly what that role is? Somebody that you were, riding in an elevator with for 30 seconds. And I ask that because I take a look at your Instagram and it's just a who's who of pop singers and movie stars and TV. I'm guessing you're not just, rubbing elbows with famous people all day.
Yeah. And I'm going to take your 30 seconds thing as a challenge. I'm going to try and do it as so my day-to-day really has kind of three key parts to it. The first, which is what the role I was promoted into, is actually servicing and booking the shows that we work on. So throughout the year, the Golden Globes, New Year's Rockin' Eve, the Academy of Country Music Awards, Billboard Music Awards, the Streamy Awards, American Music Awards, actually booking artists to be on those shows. So that means working with their managers, their record labels, working on budgets for what those performances will be. How do they fit into the time cycle or the record cycle that artist is part of, and actually booking performances that will be part of the core programming. That's the first part. The second, which I love and I think has become a personal strong suit of mine, is working with digital creators. So people who have massive followings on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc., on ways to bring them into the show. And that's the talent side, but it's also how do we partner with them in an interesting way. I had an amazing opportunity last year, and we were lucky to bring Amelia de Moldenberg, the host of Chicken Shop Date, which is a popular YouTube series, to host our Golden Globe red carpet, and to partner with a talent like her in a way that creates really interesting content that Gen Z, millennial, and audiences beyond will want to consume. So working with her, we just had the kids from Recess Therapy on the Globe's red carpet, which was super incredible to work on and created some viral content. So that's the second, meaningfully partnering with talent in ways that you wouldn't expect. And then third, I still do a lot of work with our marketing and partner and kind of lead and work with one of my colleagues on digital partnerships. So working with platforms like Spotify on interesting ways to bring them into our programming. Probably the best example would be for last year's Billboard Music Awards. We partnered with Spotify to bring top fans of all of the performing artists on our show. So let's use Carol G as an example. We had her perform here in LA. We were able to identify in partnership with Spotify Carol's biggest fans in the LA area and invite them to come to her performance and reward them with this experience and get to celebrate Carol's Billboard Music Awards wins with her and see a once-in-a-lifetime performance in a really intimate environment, which was a very special moment for these fans. And we did that with multiple artists, with everyone from Morgan Wallen to Tate McRae and many more in partnership with Spotify. So it's booking, talent partnerships, and then really sort of working with digital platforms to partner with them in meaningful ways around the shows.
You've got this business education from Boston University. I'm wondering if you're the kind of guy that has my 5-year plan, my 10-year plan. But I know obviously you've been doing some really cool creative things inside of Dick Clark Productions. I know you're doing some really cool things supporting artists outside of Dick Clark Productions. Yeah. What's next for you? Do you know where the rest of this career is going?
I mean, I love the idea of being a producer, and I do think that one day I would love to run DCP. I think I've spent such a history with the company. Like, I do see so much long-term potential at the company, and I'd love to be in a leadership role, a greater leadership role, I should say. But I love the idea of producing. I love working with artists. I've definitely thought about like, oh, is there an opportunity for me to do something that's like management and production at the same time? And I love growing and taking talent and seeing them emerge. And some of them end up becoming, your best friends. I've been a huge champion, and I'm so proud of everything that this comedian Matt Friend, he's an impressionist, has done, and we've worked together now on 4 or 5 shows, and he's become one of my best friends. And being able to be a partner to him on his career is amazing, and I hope to be able to do that with other artists and creators, whether through my role at DCP or something in the future. But there's nothing more rewarding than being able to provide an opportunity that can change somebody's career. So however I can do that's where I'll be working.
Well, Jeremy, you talked about your programming council experience, and I will never forget. I attended an event that you had planned with your fellow volunteers with the comedian Seth Meyers, and I think I remember watching you get your picture taken with him, and I could just see on your face that you were like, "This is the thing. This is the thing." It's been really awesome to see how you've turned your BU experience into this full-time job where you're doing these really cool things.
It's awesome. Yeah, the Seth Meyers show, I'll never forget that. Timing is everything. We happened to book him, I think, after he had left SNL, but just before he got his late night show. And SNL, like those were just great bookings to get because they were easy to get them up to Boston from New York. And yeah, Colin Jost opened for him, who's now a regular on SNL.
Jeez, I didn't even remember that.
Yeah, no, it was pretty crazy. That was great. I remember we had Childish Gambino, who's now gone on to headline Coachella. So yeah, those were amazing experiences. And yeah, that was a very fun day. I remember watching like the ticket sales for Seth Meyers, like in the dining hall, like people purchasing, and you're like, oh, this is big. This is going to be exciting.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, again, it's been so great to catch up with you after a few years, and congrats on everything that you're working on. And I look forward to staying connected to you.
It's been amazing. And I will just say also, and I say this when I speak at BULA, if anyone's listening or has further questions, like find me, like I'm on social media, and I'm sure there are ways that BU can put us in touch, but I'm happy to be a resource to anyone who has questions about getting into the industry. Or just a resource for kind of getting through professional life.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Cool. Thank you.
My thanks again to Jeremy for joining me on the podcast and for all of his amazing support over the years, hiring BU alumni, speaking to current BU students, and being an amazing resource for the Terrier community. If you heard something today that makes you proud to BU, I hope you'll join me in donating to the BU cause that matters to you most at bu.edu/give.
Thanks for listening to Proud to Be You. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your episodes. The Proud to Be You podcast is produced by Boston University and our partners 5 Tool Productions, a BU alumni-owned, Boston-based company specializing in video production, live streaming, and content marketing. Our theme from Artist.io is Think About Lights by Ben Fox. All additional media in this episode has been shared by our guest. To learn more about Proud to Be You, visit bu.edu/proud to be you.